I'm ready.
Okay. And whenever you're ready.
Sure, go.
Okay. Do you remember the first time you heard Gene Vincent in the Blue Caps?
When Beat Babalula came out in, what was it, 58? 57, in fact, yeah. I started early, you know. We got Bill Haley first, and then we got Elvis, and then people like Eddie Cochran, Pat Stamino, Gene Vincent, the whole lot, you know. It was like the punk thing, really. They were all there for 2 years, and then they were gone, you know. Chuck Berry was in jail, Elvis was in the army. It was weird, you know. But Vincent was the one we all wanted to look like, you know. Elvis and Gene Vincent were the ones you wanted to look like.
And did their music impress you right away?
Yeah, I must admit, the Blue Caps were never my favourite band, you know. As a backing band, I thought Little Richard had a much better backing band, people like that, you know, with the saxophones and stuff. But Vincent was a great figure, you know, to watch, because we used to see him a lot in England, because he went to England to live for a while, and then he went to France to live after that. And that's where Vince Taylor came from, you know. And I met Gene Vincent about 4 or 5 times, you know, backstage when he was working with the Outlaws, a band called the Outlaws in England. What was that? That would be 64, 5, something like that, I think. But I'm not sure, you'd have to figure it out. I met him a few times, yeah. He was like drunk before he went on stage every night, a whole bottle, because he was in pain, you know, from his leg and his hand.
And what was different about him, like in his performance? What was different about the other performers at that time?
The black leather, you know, mainly, because nobody else wore black leather on stage because it's too hot, you know, but he didn't seem to care, it didn't bother him. And the leg back, you know, and the looking up all the time, you know, that was really odd, I thought, but I liked it, you know, it was good. And he always looked like a rocker, you know. There's no, like, sweaters with upturned collars with Gene, you know, he was always in leather, right? It was good.
And did you watch TV programs like Oh Boy
Oh, yeah.
to see Gene and other
And
artists?
Cliff Richard was cool. Yeah, he was. He was Elvis in England, you know, he had sideburns. And Cliff Richard's gimmick, can you believe it? He never smiled. That was his gimmick back then. Nowadays, he smiles all the bloody time, you know.
And was the general population at that time, like in England, shocked by American rock and roll artists?
Well, I wasn't part of that strata, you know. I mean, I was part of the ones that were thrilled by it, weren't shocked, you know. We liked all that stuff, and our parents obviously hated it, you know, because it wasn't as bad as America, where the priest would preach against it in the church, you know. But we didn't have the church thing, but they were all outraged and shocked and stunned and, you know, upset and all that. And we loved that, you know. And that's the test of good rock and roll. If your father hates it, it's good, you know.
So do you remember the first time that you saw Gene? Where was it? Where was the performance? And,
Live.
yeah.
In a place called Prestatyn, and I lived in North Wales, see? So it's Prestatyn, Prestatyn, Prestatyn. They used to have a dance hall up there, bands would come there, you know. We saw Gene Vincent, there was Nero and the Gladiators, who had a couple of hits. There's all kinds of people went up there, you know.
Do you remember who the backing band was?
No, that was the British Blue Caps. I don't know who was in them. There was just a bunch of guys with blue caps on, you know. Like, yeah, I don't know who it was. Maybe it was the core group of the Tornadoes. Did a lot of session work for bands. You know, they would go on the road with different people. Might have been them.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Gene Vincent song?
Probably I'm Going Home to See My Baby, because that had sounds incorporated back in him, and that was the perfect band for Gene, I thought, you know. It was a perfect band for anybody, they were great, sounds incorporated. You know them, right?
Yeah.
They were one of the best bands I ever saw. See them live, man, it was incredible, you know. What an act, you know.
Yeah.
And the sax player, Griff, right, he used to do cartwheels across the stage playing.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty difficult to try it sometime.
I know I already can't.
Yeah.
And Gene, he became much more popular in England than he was in the U.S. And why do you think that was?
I don't know. It was also true of Buddy Holly. You know, the same thing exactly. I don't know. It was too extreme, probably. You know, the way he looked. I don't know. It's like in America, if you're not pretty, you know, they don't like you. You know. So and they didn't know how to promote him either. I guess, you know. And America got out of rock and roll, you know, and into Bobby Rydell and all them assholes, you know. So it was difficult for a lot of rock and rollers back then. And Gene was one of them. He realised that he could make money here, you know, and especially in Europe, even more than England. I mean, in France, he was God, you know. So.
Yeah. Do you remember hearing about the car accident that he and Eddie Cochran were in?
I remember that. 61. No, 60. Right. That's Cochran died in 61, I think. I was going to see the second half of the tour, and he was going home in the break in the middle of the tour, and he got killed, right? So I never got to see Eddie Cochran. And Gene Vincent skated across the street on the back of his head, right? Yeah. And Sharon Shealy got thrown out of the car, so yeah, I remember it very well.
A lot of the musicians that became popular in the 60s were influenced by people like Gene Vincent. And while Gene had a hard time keeping his career going,
Yeah.
why do you think, suppose that was?
Because people like, new is always good with people, I don't know why, you know. Very often the old is better, but they like the new one better because they found him, you know. Like Alvin Stardust was the most obvious, right? Gene Vincent copy, and Vince Taylor, you know, he was. So Vince was English, you know. Well, so was Alvin Stardust, doesn't matter. But Vince was earlier. Vince was while Gene was still alive, you know. But Alvin Stardust took almost the whole thing from Gene, you know. The black leather, the stance, you know, and all that.
Well, I mean, obviously you've been in the music business for quite some time now.
Quite some time now.
And Gene had problems with record labels and managers. Is it a tough industry, and what do you think it takes to remain successful?
I don't know. We've only been successful for about 5 years out of our whole career, you know. I don't know, you know, the business is full of assholes anyway who don't care about the music at all, you know. They just sell it like it's a can of beans, you know, it don't matter to them. And you got to understand them. That's what they are. They're businessmen. They're not artists, you know. They're not, you know, music lovers. They're businessmen, you know. So they're going to be assholes, aren't they? Because to be a good businessman, you have to be an asshole, you know. So that's how it is, you know. You can't bitch about it, really. It's always been the same. It's not different now, you know.
Did his music have an influence on the bands that you played in?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the early bands we were doing his songs. A few of his songs, you know, we used to do She, Little Sheila. We used to do Bebop Baloo and a couple of bands I was in. We did I'm Going Home in one band I was in. But we didn't have saxophone, so it wasn't so good, you know.
Can you tell how much of an influence that Gene Vincent had or has had on music in general?
I don't know, you know. I think he was more valuable as an image than as a singer because he didn't have a lot of hits. Even when he came over here, he didn't have a lot of hits in the charts, you know. But it was like the iconic black leather thing, you know. And that weird stance, you know, the legs sticking back behind him, you know, that was... And I seen he used to throw his leg over the mic stand, you know.
Oh.
During his show, that was really good.
And he kept touring, like, non-stop.
Yeah, for years and years. He was like Motörhead like that, yeah, same thing. He didn't die that young, did he? He was 40-something.
He was 36?
No, he was older than that.
Yeah?
Yeah. He was in the Navy before he was a singer.
Yeah.
You know, so he must have been 18 when he was in the Navy. That's,
yeah.
You know. So if you call it 54, he would be 18. You know, he's got to be older than 36, right?
Yeah, it could be, yeah.
But all the same, he wasn't that old, I guess. But, I mean, you know, given that he had all them injuries and shit, you know, a hard life, drinking a bottle before you go on stage and another one after it. You know, I'm sure he was on several kinds of medication for the pain, too.
Yeah.
Probably addicted to that, too, you know. I think he did very well to last that long, really.
And probably the last question is, Do you think Gene Vincent got all the recognition he deserved in his
No.
lifetime?
Nowhere near it, you know. Because, like I said, America turned its back on him quite early, you know. He had hits over here after he had, I'm Going Home was a hit here, it wasn't in America, you know. A lot of people don't get the recognition they deserve, you know. I mean, look at Elvis Presley. I mean, he's huge and everything, but he doesn't get the recognition for the first part of his career. People remember Vegas, you know, nowadays, you know. And that wasn't what he was about for me at all. I mean, he was the first singer, the first rock and roll singer, you know. I mean, we had Bill Haley, but, you know, we won't talk about that. You know, little fat guy with a kiss curl, you know, nah, not the same. Elvis was the first icon, you know, and Gene Vincent was very fast after him, you know, so I don't think many of those guys got as much recognition, you know, not in their lifetime anyway, not when they were around first, you know. I did this rockabilly band as a side project, you know, Headcat, right? So I meet a lot of like rockabilly people in that band, you know, so we talk about all kinds of older guys, you know, back then. Gene Vincent, Levi and the Rockettes, he was a big Gene Vincent fan, right? Yeah, I mean, it's not like, you know, you talk about Gene Vincent, you know, you talk about them all, you know, right?
Well, the Teddy Boys and the Rockers. I mean, were you part of that scene?
My brother was a Teddy Boy. I inherited one of his jackets later. No, I wasn't old enough, you know, really to be a Teddy Boy, but I remember him. I remember it well, yeah. We used to show fish hooks in the lapels of your jacket so that you grab you and then you can't let go, right? And you know, the old British standby, you know, used to call stick the nut on them, you know. Because Americans didn't realise that for years and years and years. You could walk up to any American, go bang, you know, and he wouldn't see it coming, you know, because they fight like this, you know. And always a bit of an advantage there, you know.
Did you fight a lot?
Everybody fights a lot when they're 15, you know.
Yeah.
You have to stay alive, eh? At school, you know. I mean, kids are such assholes, you know. I mean, kids are the most cruel people on the face of the earth. If you want a good torturer, get a kid, you know.
Oh. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Just
Thank you so much.